Hi, Chris. How are you?
I'm good in yourself, Tando.
I'm good, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Sure, no problem. So yeah, my name's Chris. I'm from Zim. Was born there, but I actually grew up in Cape Town. I'm currently based in Joburg now. So I'm working as a chartered accountant, doing my second year of articles at Standard Bank.
Can you tell us how you basically got into Standard Bank, but maybe start with what you studied at university to become a CA, and then in terms of articles, how you got in?
Sure. It's actually quite a long journey. So in my matric year, actually, no, let's go back to grade 9. I decided to drop accounting because it wasn't a subject that I quite enjoyed, and I didn't really grasp it. So I was like, this isn't for me. And then fast forward to matric, um, I was, contemplating what to do, and I initially wanted to take a gap year. So I didn't tell my parents my plans until I think it was around August or September came, and my mom asked me, what are you actually going to be doing? And I told her I want to take a gap year, and then she shut that down very quickly. So I had to make a quick decision to decide on what to study. So at that point in my life, I was quite into events organizing. So I decided to apply to UCT and do a Bachelor of Business Science in Marketing. And then, yeah, got accepted. And in my first year, one of the core subjects that we had to do was actually accounting. So that fear that I had became a reality, and I had to adjust. And I actually found myself, grasping the concepts and um, enjoying what I was doing. And by the time second semester came around in my first year, I then decided that I was going to switch degrees and do a Bachelor of Business Science in Finance with Accounting. So that's just a quick story of how I got to the decision to study how to become a chartered accountant. And then, yeah, in terms of actually getting the job and deciding where to do my articles, it's quite a lengthy process because there are various options available and various firms that do offer the chance to do your articles. So the general option is either between going the audit route with your KPMGs and your PwCs, and then going the banking route. And I'd initially gotten offers from quite a few companies, so KPMG and Pick and Pay to do my articles, but then I declined that. And I think it was around my third or fourth year when the banking industry really piqued my interest, and I then decided that I was very keen on joining Standard Bank. And a lot of decisions went into that process. So I like the fact that they were very African in the way that they do work and the way that they conduct themselves, and they had a very client-centric model about their business, and they were quite innovative and still are in terms of what they were doing. And I wanted the chance to be a part of that, team and culture and general vibes. So yeah, I then opted to join Standard Bank and got accepted there in my final year of studies. So once I completed my undergrad, I did a postgrad. And yeah, that's how I got accepted. And then in terms of the details of the actual interview process, it was a 3-stage process. So, the first one was more about culture fit. The second one was, your psychometric testing. And
Can you just go into a little bit more detail? Sorry about that. So when you say culture fit, what kind of questions were asked? What sort of preparation did you do going into it? Yeah, things like that.
Okay. Oh, you're taking me back 2 years now. I need to remember what was going on. But now, sure. So actually, before the first round of interviews, we had a cocktail evening with Standard Bank. So that's where we were able to actually engage with about 2 trainees that were already on the program. and then the HR manager and training officer. So within that space, that's where, you know, we had the first initial opportunity to stamp our mark and, you know, create that first impression, which is vital because it sort of sets the foundation for your interviews going forward. So I think that was a key step. And in terms of the preparation I did beforehand, you know, in deciding to join Standard Bank and the actual interview preparation, a lot of it just went down to firstly understanding what the company, you know, actually does. So looking at like the integrated report that they release on an annual basis, you know, looking at their business model, their strategic drivers, understanding the key risks, and, you know, understanding the general industry as well, because you want to ensure that you're fully prepared for whatever they're asked, whether it's, you know, specific things that are happening within Standard Bank, specific ratios or metrics that are key to the banking industry as a whole, and then just understanding, you know, the general market, especially within SA, as that's the base of our operations. So those are the key sort of preparation factors that came into play, you know, in coming to that. And then in terms of culture fit and the questions that they're asked around that, you know, it's not necessarily direct culture questions. It's more trying to understand, you know, who you are as a person. You know, what are your values? Giving you, you know, situational questions like how you deal with conflict. Looking at your past records. So, you know, what internships have you done, and what sort of knowledge did that, you know, how bold in those processes, and looking at, you know, aspects like your leadership capabilities. So what sort of roles were you involved in, you know, at varsity, and yeah, those sort of aspects. So those are the general sort of questions that we got in the first round. And then beyond that, they also gave us, you know, a few brain teasers. So, you know, it was questions that weren't necessarily looking for the right answers. It was just to kind of gauge your thinking process, and, you know, how you dissect problems, especially, you know, when they're questions that are completely out the blue and don't have a definitive answer.
Was this in the
have
second stage,
that
or
was
in
the first round?
first round
That was in
still?
the first
Okay.
round.
Okay.
So, yeah, so as part of the culture fit, we
Okay.
also had a few brain teaser questions, and yeah. So it was very important just for them to gauge our personalities and gauge the way we think on the spot, and, you know, whether we crack under pressure or are able to rationalize and dissect things, break them down, and then come up with a coherent answer. So yeah, that was
Excellent.
it.
And then the second and the third stage?
Second stage was literally just psychometric testing.
Okay.
So the first one was, I guess, kind of a psychological and emotive sort of test to gauge our personalities more. And then the second part of the psychometric was just around like your numerical and logical thinking. So going to an assessment center and being asked a series of questions based on patterns, and off that they got a better understanding of how, you know, we thought things through, and, you know, what sort of person would we be in the working environment, and how we deal with analytical problems. So yeah, that was the second round. And then as it relates to the third round, I think that was probably my favorite, because it was broken up into a group presentation and then an individual presentation. So the group presentation was literally getting a question on the spot, or not a question, but a scenario on the spot, and literally them trying to gauge how we work with other people, how we interpret things again, how we dissect problems down, and then our ability to actually convey those messages in a group setting and deliver a presentation based on that. And then the individual presentation was a selected topic that they'd given us beforehand, which we got to prepare for, and create a PowerPoint, and then deliver a 15-minute presentation on that, and have a short Q&A section as part of that. So yeah, that was it.
Okay, thank you. And can you maybe take us through the difference between, so say someone wants to look at the auditing firms and the banking firms. You know, you've informed us what sort of informed your decision, but like what's the difference between following the different routes for people who are interested?
Sure. So it's quite a hard question to dissect, and there's a lot of factors that go into that. So I think just to start off, my first point of advice would be that, you know, there are a lot of options out there, and the only way that you're going to learn about these options is if you engage with people. So whether it be through, you know, going to expos or networking events, or joining societies where you have sponsorship partnerships with these select companies, it's very important that you actually engage with these people and get an understanding of what they do in their respective fields, whether it is auditing or banking, because that can help you shape your decision more, especially when you are completely out the blue in terms of what's going on. So that's something I highly recommend, and it's something I, you know, took advantage of throughout my varsity career, because it does, you know, shape your understanding and help you come to that decision. And then in terms of the differences, I'd say, not to get too technical, but essentially your electives are different depending on what field you choose. And by electives, I mean Psycho, which governs, you know, the chartered accountants within South Africa, sets out standards in terms of what you need to do as part of your articles. So for example, with banking, our electives are accounting and financial management, whereas with auditing, the electives are mainly auditing based. So that obviously plays a big decision into what you want to do. And then I think it's also important to kind of develop some sort of clarity in terms of where you want to go in your career. You know, where is it that you see yourself once you complete your articles, or, you know, what sort of fields do you enjoy working in? And from a high level, you can start there, then break it down and say, okay, cool, what sort of exposure will give me the necessary skills so that I end up at that point in my life where I want to be. So yeah, that for me played a big role in my drive to sort of join Standard Bank. So yeah, that's what I would say.
And then can you maybe tell us what you do on a day-to-day basis? Like what would that look like? And I think it's 3 years of articles that you guys do. So
Yeah,
how is each year different?
sure. So within the bank, our articles, like you said, is 3 years. And in the space of those 3 years, we get to rotate amongst a number of different teams. And as you may or may not know, the bank is split up into many divisions. So there's corporate and investment banking, there's wealth, and then there's personal and business banking as well. And within those divisions, there are various functions. So there's front office roles, there's, you know, back office roles like finance, and then there's like treasury and capital management. So there's a lot on offer that you get exposed to in your time, you know, doing your articles there, which is great. Because yes, it's a select few months that you spend within a specific team, but the amount of knowledge that you're able to gain from various areas is quite a bit. So just to make it more personal with my journey, I've actually only rotated within the corporate and investment banking finance space over these last 2 years of my articles. And within those in those rotations, I've been in financial control, I've been in financial insights and analytics with a focus on Africa regions, and I'm currently in investment banking, product control. And in terms of the detail of what I do, there's a big focus on, like I said, the electives that get dealt to us, so like the accounting and financial management focuses. So I cover everything from, doing recons to balance sheet substantiations to what I'm working on now, which is like a risk report sort of template. And I've done like great sort of projects beyond the normal month end and routine stuff that is required of me. So like I got the opportunity to go to Zambia last year to work on a costing project, basically to try and understand the value chain within a specific division in corporate and investment banking, and all the touch points within that division. So yeah, the breadth of my work is quite deep and technical. So I won't get into too much of it now, but at a high level, that's what I do. So yeah.
And what does the continuity look like in terms of the bank? Do they onboard you after you are done with your 3 years of articles? And is that everyone, or is it just based on your decision, or do they cut down and decide maybe you didn't fit into any department that you rotated into, and so we have to let you go?
Sure. So with us, what was great is we signed permanent contracts when we joined. So essentially after our 3 years do end, they do look to place us in whatever roles are available. In terms of the actual decision making around where you want to go, obviously, you have your own views in terms of where you want to be. So that obviously drives a lot of the decision making on your end. But as with any job, it all depends on headcount. So sometimes you may not necessarily get what you want, and you may have to, settle for a certain job. But yeah, we are permanent, so there is a guarantee once we do end that we will be placed. And the decision, it comes down to you. So if you do find something, outside of the organization, you can leave. But I think there's great comfortability knowing that once we do complete our articles, we will be placed somewhere. And there's obviously a good demand for CAs still within the bank, whether it's in your finance roles or whatever it may be. So yeah, there's a good chance of being placed.
And as a final question, what would you advise someone who wants to get in, wants to do their articles there? How would you advise them to basically prepare, one, and number two, to conduct themselves, like in the interviews? What would be your advice there? And then lastly, in terms of when they do their articles, what kind of attitude or skills would you advise them to have?
Okay, sure. It's a fully loaded question, Setando. But yeah, starting with question one, I think I touched on this already, but I'll reiterate it again. Do your research and talk to as many people as you can. Also, don't be afraid to reach out to people on LinkedIn. What I've learned is, people are very willing to actually engage you. All you need to do is initiate, and yes, you may find a rejection in some cases, but for the most part, a lot of people are actually willing to engage you. So don't be afraid to, search for people and where they work, and even if you don't know them, just drop them a message and be like, hey, I'm looking at doing my articles here, what can I advise, or what has your experience been? So yeah, do your research and reach out to people and engage with people on what they do. And then your second question, just remind me, what was that again?
In relation to the interviews, what would you advise them?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So it's been a long day. so my memory is a bit forgetful. Yeah, in relation to the interviews, obviously, be fully prepared. So do your research on the company, and understand the metrics within the industry, and understand what's going on within the market and economy as a whole. Because a lot of the interviews are very much based on up-to-date things that are happening. So make sure there is an awareness of about that, and be sure to understand the relevant standards within what you study and how they're impacting the bank. So for example, if IFRS 9 has been quite prevalent throughout this year, given what's been happening with COVID and how that's taken a knock on the economy. So understanding that and how it impacts the banking industry as a whole is very important. And the ability to convey those insights goes a long way in those interviews. And then I know this is cliche, but genuinely be yourself. It's very easy to pick up on when someone's faking it, or they're not genuine. So always be yourself, and make sure you bring your value proposition to the interview, to the party, because that goes a long way. And yeah, it really does showcase who you are as a person. And then yeah, third question.
What would you advise them in terms of when they do their articles, the attitude or the skills or whatever they should have?
Sure. This is something I actually thought about before this interview. And I was actually watching a talk last night that ABSIP was conducting. And it just made me think about the fact that, you come into this organization as a chartered accountant, but given, what's happening in the world and the way things are changing and all these new trends coming into play, there's a bigger, a bigger sort of responsibility on yourself, and a bigger expectation on your employee side, because they expect a lot more from you. I mean, I don't necessarily mean you need to be an expert in, like data science, for example, but there's a bigger expectation of understanding what these new emerging trends mean, and how this will impact the industry and the bank specifically, and what your role will be as a chartered accountant in these changes that are occurring. So the best thing is you need to be dynamic in terms of your understanding of what's going on, and you can't be hindered by what you studied, and you shouldn't allow what you studied to hinder your learning. You need to be a lifelong learner, because change is constant, and you need to be adaptable in terms of that. And that means that in terms of your attitude, it has to be one of, are you keen to learn? Are you showing interesting things? You're not necessarily an expert, but your interesting things, helps you to build on your knowledge set. And for me personally, the role and understanding of what it means to be a chartered accountant has definitely changed. And if you still want to be at the core of business and the core of decision making, you need to take a whole lot more in. And yeah, I mean, your attitude needs to reflect that. And I think just more on the softer skills side, be personable to people, be able to relate to them, take the time to engage with your colleagues. When you rotate around a lot and you spend 6 months in a certain team, take full advantage of that. Engage with them, understand what they do, show interest in what they do, because as much as you are, you've shown that you qualified and you've gotten to this point that you've landed in the bank. The lasting impression that you always leave on people is your attitude in that space, and it really does go a long way in your ability to build relationships and get to a point where, you know, you want to end up doing the job that you do at some point in time. So yeah, that's it.
I fully agree. Thank you so much for doing this, and I'm sure it will help
No problem.
quite a number of people who have questions. Where can people reach you if they have any questions for you?
Sure. You can get me on LinkedIn. My name is Chris Mparutsa, Mparutsa. Yeah, don't be afraid to read.
So you cut there for a second. Can you repeat the last part?
Sure. I said you can get me on LinkedIn. My name is Chris Mparutsa, Mparutsa. Yeah, don't be afraid to reach out and ask any questions, or, you know, ask me any advice. I'm always willing to help out.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Okay.